All right, CNT120. This is our review of Chapter 1, so let's jump in here. Here's a list of the objectives for the chapter. I'm going to be breaking the chapter into pieces, so this will be the kind of the introduction piece, and then we'll start doing additional podcasts on each topic. Well, before we dig into anything they're talking about, we have to remember what is a network and kind of like why do we have it. That context will help us understand a lot of things that they're going to share with us. So first thing, this is almost a definition from the book. Networks are a group of computers and other devices. Think about all the devices in your house, laptops, phones, game consoles, etc., that are connected by some type of transmission media. That could be an actual cable, like plugging your PlayStation directly in to your switch and router at home, or using Wi-Fi for something like our Nintendo Switch is connected through Wi-Fi. That kind of thing, or your laptop or your phone. All of those things are connected together for usually a purpose. Well, let's understand that real quickly. So, roll back in time. Why have a network? So we want to start with how companies kind of came about networks, and then we'll see how it applies to us in our houses as well. So why have a network? Back in the, we're going to say 60s to 70s time frame, a lot of companies actually had a mainframe computer. It was one giant computer. Think of it like one giant desktop in your house that everybody in the house connected into was just a monitor and a keyboard. Mice didn't exist yet. So just a monitor and keyboard connected into it, and we were actually all sharing this one computer. So if I created a file on here, everybody else had access to it. They might have to wait till I'm done with it, but they would be able to access the file because it's all on a single computer. That was your early mainframe days. Along comes 70s into 80s, we start getting desktop computers. And different manufacturers have their own desktop computers. We start getting desktop computers. Well, now we don't have a way to move data between computers. So you literally had to put data onto a removable drive. In those days, it was a floppy disk. Today, you can think of it as a USB drive. But you literally need to put that file on the floppy disk, walk it to another computer, plug it in, open the file to be able to print it, because that's the one that had the printer connected. They affectionately called that sneakernet, because you were literally moving the files around manually. That's when networks said, hey, we need a way to more efficiently do this same thing. Move files between computers, or be able to send my file to a printer somewhere in my network. So companies were like, okay, we need this thing called a network to connect all our computers together. Well, again, in those days, we're talking 80s into 90s now. In those days, all the computers were proprietary. So in this case, Apple computers used Apple network cards with Apple cabling and Apple protocols to be able to move data around their Apple network. And if I tried to put a different manufacturer in here, it wouldn't work, and vice versa. Meanwhile, IBM was doing the same thing with their computers. Their IBM computers using IBM network cards, using IBM cables, using IBM protocols and IBM devices to connect the computers together to make an IBM network. Xerox was doing the same thing. Xerox computers, Xerox network cards, Xerox cables, Xerox protocols to connect their computers together to make a network. Well, that Xerox network affectionately became known as Ethernet. So Ethernet was basically one solution out of multiple different manufacturers on how to move data between computers, how to make a network between their computers. Well, we zoom ahead today, and most everybody has an Ethernet network that they do this with. Okay, in a company, they were moving files between to printers. Well, nowadays, they're moving files between all kinds of different types of devices, including to printers, including to servers, and then even sharing the internet connection, ISP connection, for that facility. Okay, that's kind of where company networks are now. You notice there's cameras and IP phones and smart devices and laptops and so forth, all connected in the network to share devices like printers, and also share internet connections. Keep that in mind. Let's jump over to our houses. Again, our houses, for most people, we're going to say the 80s to 90s now. In the 80s to 90s, they might have had one computer and a dial-up modem that you would use the phone line from the phone company. That's the Public Switch Telephone Network over here, PSTN. They would literally connect their computer to a modem. The modem would dial up a phone number to get you connection to the ISP, out to the internet, if you will. And you literally shared the phone line. So as the computer was being used, the phone could not. As the phone was being used, the computer could not. You would share that phone line. That was very normal for most people. Some people would eventually get a separate phone line, one for the phone, one for the computer. Our house, we did not. We saved money. I was paying the phone bill and the ISP bill, if you will, and we were sharing that. We were not getting a second phone line. That was extra cost. But some people did that. Along comes DSL or cable for people that can now give us a higher bandwidth connection for the computer. And some people then had DSL and a phone line separate entities. I did have this in our house, and many people did too. They might have had a cable modem through your cable provider and a phone line through the local phone provider. And now you literally had two connections, one for computer and one for phone. Well, the challenge came when that second computer came home, whether it be, your home computer and now you're bringing your office computer home, or you had the home computer in the living room and now we get another computer for, the kids' room or the den or something like that. When that second computer came on, now we have an issue because this modem was designed to handle one computer. So what a lot of people did was they started sharing and talking to their neighbors, and somebody would suggest, hey, go out and get this router thing. Linksys Netgear router, go to Blah store, in those days, Staples, Office Max, Best Buy, Circuit City, those kind of things. Go there and get this router thing. And what that allowed them to do is have two devices connect to here and out to their ISP. What people didn't really realize is what this was, and we'll talk about that in just a second. So now we zoom ahead to today, and this is probably what a lot of our networks look like at home. You have some laptops, maybe some desktops. I have one desktop plugged in, if you will. We have some game consoles. We have a lot of laptops. We have a lot of smartphones in the house. We don't have any tablets, but this probably looks like your house, where this device, all of these things in the house are connecting to this device, and that connects out to your ISP, and now you have internet connection. And I can share devices between, but more importantly, I can share the internet connection out to the ISP. That's one of the big reasons we have networks in our houses. Well, this device right here that people bought, this Linksys Netgear Belkin router that they put in, what many people didn't realize is it is actually a network in a box. It's all contained in one box for the homeowner user. But if I were to, and I always say this, jokingly, don't do this, but if I were to break that thing open, kind of bust the cover off, I would literally find circuitry in here and a port for connection out to your ISP. That's the router, if you will. There's a connection from the router into the switch. Well, the switch are the ports that are on the side that I can plug my computers into. So there's a switch built in there. And then there is usually an antenna. They used to be external to these, the device you have at home. A lot of them now are internal. They're wrapped around the case inside. But that antenna is now your access point. And that access point is literally connected into the switch into the router out to the ISP. This thing right here is a network in a box. That's the only way I can describe it. So what companies did, we now emulated, some cases maybe 10 years behind what companies did. And now we literally have the same type of setup that companies have for the same purpose. Sharing these devices, sharing information between these devices, but in many cases, more importantly, sharing that single internet connection out to the ISP. And many of us have maybe a half dozen to a dozen things in our house that connect out through that ISP connection, out through Comcast, Verizon, whomever you have as your provider. Okay, so that is a network, and that's why we have a network. So if we keep that in mind, a lot of what the book is going to talk about, these different topologies and devices and so forth, start making a little more sense to us if we kind of remember what we have at home and why we have it at home. And that is pretty much why we have it at home. That's why I have this in my house. I'm going to simplify there. That's why I have this in my house for all my devices to connect to and then connect out to the ISP, and we share the internet connection in the house. So let's keep that in mind before we dig into anything else new that the chapter talks about. We'll come back in the next podcast and continue on.